Hi, everybody. Welcome to the second edition of the Young Researchers in Spectral Geometry conference. Today and tomorrow, we will host six talks by leading researchers having either during their PhD or having recently had their PhD. We start today with Michael Naon from Université Savoie-Mont-Blanc, who will talk to us about degenerate free discontinuity problems and quantitative spectral inequalities. So, Michael, the floor is yours. Thank you very much.
Okay. First, thank you for the invitation to speak here and for the organization of this seminar. So, yes, today I'm going to talk about this. And first, I will first describe what I mean by quantitative spectral inequalities and quantitative geometric inequalities in general. So, in a very general setting in shape optimization, so we give ourselves a certain admissible set, so a subset of every set in the Euclidean space, for example. Everything I do here will be in the Euclidean space, and a certain functional on this admissible set. And so the classical question we could ask is, for example, what is the extremal value of this functional? Is it reached for some optimal set? And if it is reached, then there is a question of stability, meaning if a certain set is close to the optimal in this sense, then is this set close to an optimal set in some sense? And so there's been a lot of research in the question of stability in the last few years, and notable example is a case of isoperimetric inequality, where everything is solved. So, so in this setting, the admissible set is, for example, every open set in the Euclidean space. You can add some smoothness in the set, for example, and with a volume constraint. And the functional is the perimeter. That is defined usually as a total variation, but you can think of it as a n-1 dimensional measure of the boundary. So we know the minimum is attained for the perimeter of the ball of same measure. Well, this question is the same. And about the stability, the answer is positive, meaning that if a set of measure M has perimeter that is close to the ball, then we know that this set is close to the ball in some sense. So the sharp result we know today is this one that was proven by Fusco, Maggi, and Pratelli in 2008, meaning that this quantity, which is always positive, is bounded below by the distance between two sets square, where this distance is usually called the Frankel asymmetry. So this is a measure of the symmetric difference between the two sets, where we translate them so that the overlap between the two is maximal. So this is a measure of the area here. So actually, there was a lot of intermediate results to arrive to this one. For example, with higher exponent here, or with additional hypothesis on A. And but this one, we know it is sharp in the sense that, for example, if you take a ball and you perturb it slightly into an ellipsoid, then both sides here will be equivalent up to a constant. Okay. And now let me present the problem that we will look at today, which is a certain quantity that is linked to thermal insulation. So the setting is, you consider a domain, for example, a solid in R3 that has constant thermal conductivity. So you suppose the exterior is at temperature 0, for example, and you suppose there is a thin layer of insulating material on the boundary. So when I say a thin layer, it means, for example, a layer of thickness epsilon and of conductivity that is proportional to epsilon, so beta epsilon for a certain constant beta. And with this model, we know that when epsilon goes to 0, the equation, the heat equation on D becomes, well, inside D, it's a usual heat equation, and we suppose that there is a heat source, a constant heat source in D. And on the boundary, as epsilon goes to 0, the problem converges to a Robin boundary condition. So this is the inward, so this is the outward normal derivative with a minus. So the inward derivative of U is a constant, which is the ratio between the conductivity and the width of insulator times U. So for a short historical note, this is called the Robin boundary condition, but this comes from Gustave Robin, a French mathematician, who apparently did not do any Robin boundary condition, which is something quite interesting. Okay, and now, so for beta equals 0, we find Neumann boundary condition. Beta equals infinity, we find Dirichlet boundary condition, but we suppose that we are between the two. And now let us look at the temperature at equilibrium, which is defined, well, it's just the previous equation without the temporal part. Okay, so another intuition that will be useful to us later is to see just the solution to this equation as the height of a membrane. So you suppose that you have a membrane of shade D that is attached to a rigid boundary, but it is attached with springs or with elastics that have all a certain rigidity. And when you push the membrane with a force from below, in the linear regime, it will rise with a height that is described by this equation. And we look at the following quantity, which is the mean temperature on the membrane. So we will look at the problem in which the volume of D is fixed. We only ask that D is an open set with given volume. We make no topological or geometrical assumption. And we will try to optimize this quantity. So for example, if you want to make it 0, we can take a very thin domain. The heat will escape immediately, and it can go to 0. And now, let us look at the maximization. So I start with this result from Doenbucher and Alessandro Giacomini, 2015. Which is straightforward. If you take any open set D and you take the ball with same measure, then the mean temperature on the set is less than the mean temperature on the ball with same measure. And we can actually compute this explicitly. So since we will later show a quantitative version of this inequality, I will first present the method to prove this result. So this is mainly in 2 steps. First step, we show that there exists a maximizer, and then that any maximizer is necessarily a ball. Okay, and note that both are necessary, because showing only the second wouldn't be enough, for example. So for the first step, well, we start by reformulating the problem in a setting where we don't have to solve for each domain a certain PDE. So the idea is that the temperature at equilibrium is actually the minimum of this energy functional. So here you have the quadratic part, and here's the linear part that correspond to the heat to the source term. Okay, and actually this energy is linked to the mean temperature. It is the same up to a negative constant. So we just need to minimize this quantity. So we try to minimize among every domain the minimum of a function defined on this domain. The idea will be to consider a sequence of following minimizing domain, but it's a bit difficult to have a, for example, nice compactness theorem on sequences of domains, since we don't have a bounded perimeter or anything like this. So the second step will be a relaxation of the problem. So for example, for any function defined on a certain domain D, you can extend it by 0 outside this domain. So it's some kind of H1 by part function. I'll detail just a bit more later. And on this function, you can define what we call a generalized energy. So it's exactly the same formula as earlier, except that here we integrate over Rn, here we integrate over Rn, and previously this was an integral over the boundary of the domain. Now it's an integral on a set SU, which will be the singularity set of U. So for example, when you extend the H1 function by 0, this creates a singularity along the boundary of the domain on which it was defined. So since our problem is to minimize the energy which is defined as a minimum function, we can just minimize this quantity on a certain admissible set that contains every H1 by part function. So, okay, but let's be a bit more precise. The idea is that we consider a certain admissible set of functions. So they are, for example, in L1, it's not very important, actually, this part, but such that the derivative in sense of distribution of U is an absolutely continuous part, which is the gradient we find here. So it's a L2 function, plus a singular part. So basically, it's a rectifiable hypersurface along which U may take two different values. So this value and this value. And we impose a certain condition on the size of the domain. And just to be clear, the reason here, for example, that we have two values of U, so U bar, well, U plus or U minus, you may say, for example, is that so these are the two limits of U on each side of the singular part. So this is necessary actually, because, for example, if you have a sequence of domain with a boundary like this that collapses into a single boundary, you still want to integrate the value of U on each side of the boundary, which is what you, here you have, for example, the set SU, which is here and also the circle around, and you have two different values of U on each side. Okay, so now when we relax a problem, usually, so we extend the admissible set, we extend the functional to a bigger admissible set, so that we can find a minimizer, for example. But once we have a minimizer, we need to go back to the original problem, because for every function in H1, we can extend it by 0, but not every function in this set corresponds to a certain function on a domain. The issue is that the singular set may very well be have a positive Lebesgue measure, for example. It may be dense, it may be. So there is a third step of regularity, okay, because now we suppose, we suppose that we know about the fact that there is a minimizer, and we have to show some regularity. So, okay. First, we can just show that any minimizer verifies some a priori bound, some regularity bound, like the fact that it is in L infinity. And there's also a key estimate, that is the fact that the minimum of U on its support is strictly bigger than 0. So an interpretation we might give is the fact that the value of U on the boundary is the derivative of U like this. So the heat flow is always bounded below on the boundary. And this is useful to us because with this, we are actually closer to what we call the Manford-Cha functional. So let me just go back a bit. Here we have a functional with gradient square plus the integral of the value of u on the boundary, on the jump set. And here we have the same thing, but with the measure of the singular set instead. So this is a functional that was introduced originally for the segmentation of image, like you have an image with different region, different uniform zone of color that you want to separate. So you will find a singular set with a smooth function on each, on the complementary of the singular set. And so there's been a lot of analysis for minimizer or quasi-minimizer of this. And basically, once we know that U is a quasi-minimizer, we know that the singular set is essentially closed. So basically, it is closed up to a Hn-1 negligible set, which means that the function U is actually H1 in a certain open set. So this open set, it has one unbounded component in which U is 0 and a union of bounded components, which will be the optimal domain. So with all of this, we have the existence.
I'm sorry, Michael, but there's something that I may have missed early on. What exactly do you mean by a almost quasi-minimizer? In which ways almost and quasi?
Okay, yes, this part was the thing is actually the constant. Instead of the constant here, you may have anything that vary from 1 to lambda, for example, and you may add a term that is of order r to the power n when you do modification, when you do deformation on a ball of radius r. So for this, you can see, for example, an article by Doreen Bucher and Stefan Luckhaus, 2014, where they treat the fact that for what they call almost quasi-minimizer, the singular set is closed. Yeah, so sorry, this one was a bit that maybe.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay, so now that we have the existence, let me explain quickly how the second part works. So we suppose that we have an optimal domain. We want to show that it's a ball. So basically, this is done by symmetrization. So actually, well, there's a hidden step where we show that we can suppose that our domain has a central symmetry. This means, for example, the rectangle here. This means that any line or any hyperplane in higher dimension that goes through the center will divide the domain in two parts of same measure. So when you divide the domain in two parts, and you divide the function defined on the domain in two parts, you can look at the mirrored version. So either you keep the left side here, or you keep the right side here. And so when you look at the property of convexity of the functional, we know basically that the energy of one of these is lower than the energy of this one. This means that if you have a minimizer of energy for this, if this is a minimizer of energy, then one of these is also a minimizer of energy. But the idea is that here we also mirror the function u minus, for example. So since u minus will be a smooth function, it's a solution of minus Laplace u equal 1. And it is symmetric to this line. This means basically that the gradient of u is always parallel to this line for any line that goes through the center. And so this will not imply the fact that the domain is radial, but this means that the function is a radial function, psi, on a domain that is not necessarily radial. And then there's a second step that is done by what we call spherical symmetrization. So you have an optimal domain here. You have concentric circle. We know that on each circle, U is constant. And the idea is to rearrange it such that you rearrange each circle. You see it as a the idea is you take your domain D and make it into this domain D prime such that the intersection with each circle has the same measure. But on the domain D prime, the intersection with each circle is a certain segment centered in 0. So it's necessarily of this form here. And okay, actually, we may show that the energy of this is lower than the energy of this. But there's even a little more, which is that if these two domains are not the same, which is the case here, for example, then the energy of this is strictly lower, which means that if this is a minimizer, then this symmetrization step must be trivial, which means that this domain is already of the form that is written here. So basically, it is a domain that has a central symmetry in the center point here. But when we rearrange it along each circle to bring everything to the right, for example, it stays the same domain. This means that the domain D is necessarily radial. So then there's only the case of the ball or the ring, and we can just say that only the ball is left when we analyze the ring. Okay. So now we come to the main result, which is very similar to the quantitative isoperimetric inequality, for example. It's the fact that the mean temperature on a domain D is lower than the mean temperature on a domain on the ball of same measure, minus a distance that is the same as earlier. This is the Frankel asymmetry square. Okay, well, actually, I present everything with the equation minus Laplacian U equal 1. You could do the same for equations like this, for example, and you can reformulate it in terms of semi-linear eigenvalue with a quotient formula like this. Everything works the same. I just forgot to put a dependency on Q, on the constant here. It works for Q that is between 1 and strictly lower than 2. Okay. So I will present now the ideas of the proof of this result. So actually, originally, we were looking at a slightly different problem. We were looking at the fact that the maximal of the equilibrium temperature, whether it is maximal on the ball, so on the middle of the ball, or not. So we are trying to understand this property. This was solved recently with a very different method by Alvinonic and Trombetti, but it is still open in dimension more than 3, or with equation of the form minus Laplacian U equal U to the power something. So what we did not work for this problem in particular, but we started to look at a certain functional, so an energy with obstacle. So I'll spend some time to explain what it is. The idea is this is still the same energy as earlier, so the integral of gradient square plus the integral of U square on the boundary, and so on. But we add a constraint on U. We add the fact that U must be larger than a certain constant C, which acts as an obstacle. And then we add some geometrical terms that do not depend on U. So we add minus the perimeter plus the volume. This one actually can be ignored since the volume is fixed. So if you forget for an instant the obstacle here, basically this is the energy minus the perimeter. So the energy, we know it is minimal for the ball. Minus the perimeter is maximal for the ball. But we may show that actually the sum of the two with the obstacle constraint is still minimal on the ball. Okay. And so an interpretation of this obstacle problem is, if you remember the membrane with that is attached with elastic. So you take the same membrane as earlier, and you take I don't know, a metal plate that you will lift a bit below the membrane, so that it will act as an obstacle. So in some place, the membrane will still be higher than the obstacle, and the equations do not change. It's still a Robin boundary condition. And in some other places, the membrane will touch the obstacle. So basically, here we have Dirichlet boundary conditions. So it's a mixed boundary problem. So usually we obtain a certain solution UC of D, that is for the obstacle C. It will always be higher than the original solution, since we can only lift the solution more. Okay, and actually for the ball, we can give explicit computations of the solution, because either on the ball, the solution of the regular equation with no obstacle is radial. It has this expression basically. And when you add the obstacle below, either the obstacle is strictly below the values of the function on the ball, so it has no influence, and we know the solution is still this one, or the obstacle touches the solution below, and then the solution takes this form. So this R over n beta, it is exactly the lowest value of the solution on the ball. Okay, and we can also compute explicitly what the energy with obstacle on the ball is. It's a similar formula as earlier. Okay, but now this result with obstacle, we can apply it in a particular case in which, well, if you take any domain D and the ball, and you take the functions on the domain D and on the ball, and you take an obstacle that is just below the equilibrium function on your domain. This gives you a certain inequality. Okay, so once we know this, by taking the minimal value of the equilibrium function on D, we obtain, just by rearranging the term, this inequality. Okay, so this is already some kind of stability inequality. For example, in the convex case, for convex that are not too far from the ball, we can bound this from below, and this gives actually a nice stability result, because we know that the difference of energy is bigger than this times the difference of perimeter, which acts as a measure of how far D is from a ball. But in the general case, well, it might not be the case, because we know that the difference of perimeter is bounded below with the quantitative isoperimetric inequality I presented earlier. So if we knew how to bound this quantity below, then we would be done. The problem is that this is not true in general. What kind of thing can happen? So, for example, if the domain that you take has infinite perimeter, since the equilibrium function will have a finite energy, this means that the integral of ud square on the boundary is finite, which means that the minimum of this is always 0. And another example, which is even worse in a sense, is that we don't even need to have infinite perimeter. We just need to have a certain cusp in the domain. For example, if you take, so what the epigraph of the function x squared, then at the end of the cusp, there will be no heat flow, and so the equilibrium function will be exactly 0. So this is a drawing of the two situations. If you have excuse me, if you have a lot of perimeter in some place, then u will be close to 0, and even 0 if the perimeter here is infinite. And if you have a cusp like this, u will be 0 too. Okay, so what we will do is try to find a smoother version of the set D to eliminate this part and this part. So with what we call the selection principle. So the idea is to find another domain such that its Frankel asymmetry is not too far from the Frankel asymmetry of the domain D at the beginning. Its energy is not too large compared to the energy of the starting domain, but the heat flow on the boundary will be bounded below uniformly by constants that only depends on the dimension, on the measure, and on the constant beta. So actually just taking a smooth version of the domain is not enough to obtain all these conditions. We need to consider an intermediate shape optimization problem, which is this one. We minimize the energy plus volume penalization among every domain that is contained in D. So actually, even if you forget about the volume penalization, you may see why this is a smoother version of D. This is because when you have a lot of perimeter in some place, then the membrane is held by all the elastic in this place, for example. So it creates a lot of energy. So when you make a smoother version of this of the boundary, you have less energy holding the membrane. And this is what happens. So this is not a simulation, just a drawing like this. But the optimal domain for this intermediate shape optimization problem will avoid the part with too much perimeter and the cusp. And on this, so now we can apply the fact that the energy with obstacle is minimal on D prime, which will give us the quantitative inequality on D prime, so the quantitative inequality on D. Okay. So now this was like the method to go from the fact that the energy with obstacle is minimal on the ball to the fact that we have a quantitative inequality for the mean temperature. But now let us look at the method of proof for this inequality. So there are a few steps that are very similar to what I presented earlier. So I will just say what they are. Well, there is a step of relaxation, which is really the same. So you extend every functions on a domain D. Instead of extending it by 0, it's more natural to extend it by C, which is the obstacle. So this gives you this generalized energy that is defined here on the full space, here on the full space, and here on the singular set. Okay, with still the two values on each side of the singular set. Okay. So then there is a regularity. The fact that if you have a minimizer for the relaxed version of the problem, then it is some function that is H1 in an open domain D. And actually, we don't know how to do this step. Because earlier, the key estimate was the fact that the function u was strictly above 0. Here, it's the fact that the function u is strictly above the obstacle, which is not true in general. We'll see right after. So we have a way to dodge this issue. The third step is, well, the classification of minimizer. The fact that if we have a minimizer, then it's a ball. And actually, this one, it works the same as earlier with symmetrization methods. So first, we show that it has a central symmetry. Then we show that the function u is radial in every hyperplane. And then we do a spherical rearrangement. Okay. Excuse me. And then there's a final step. And it is to show that the existence of a domain. And there is a slight difference with the method of proof, because earlier we were able to show the existence with the relaxation, and then we classified the minimizer. But here we need to do how to say it. We show that minimizer can only be balls, and then we show that they exist using the fact that they can only be balls. So this is a bit more delicate. So I will explain it in the last slide. Okay. So the problem for the regularity is the fact that well, we expect the minimum to be reached on the ball, but as I explained earlier, the solution on the ball when the obstacle is too high, well, the solution will be stuck to the obstacle, right? So we know that when the obstacle is too high, we have this condition, which means that we can't show the regularity in the same way as earlier. We can't use the fact that it's a quasi-minimizer for Manford-Shah, and so on. And actually, we may even look at a 1D case. So our functional in the 1D case, oh, excuse me, I just go back. Here, you can see that if you see this as a function of u minus c, so the distance with the obstacle, this is of order 1 in u minus c. So we can look in the 1D case at a function that is the integral of u prime square plus the sum on each discontinuity of the value, but with an exponent 1 here. And for example, if you take the function u of x equal a times x plus on the segment minus 1, 1, you look at the energy of this. So here the energy is a square. And when you lift your function a bit by creating a discontinuity here, then the energy of this function is so a minus delta square plus the new discontinuity term, so delta, which is a square, so the same energy as earlier, plus a term times delta, plus smaller term. And the issue is that depending on the value of the derivative a, the function that we lifted by a small amount delta may or may not have lower energy, which means that in some case this will be a minimizer and not this, for example. So what we do is that we change our functional just a little bit. We add an exponent here, exponent 1 plus epsilon. The effect of this is that the energy here is still the same, but the energy on when you lift a bit the function is now a square, so the same energy as here, minus plus a negative term, plus smaller term. So in this case, we know that this will have lower energy than this. So this cannot be a minimizer. And okay, so this is what we had in mind when we introduce the modified functional. So this is the same functional as earlier, because this quantity is just u squared minus c squared. And the problem is the fact that here we have a term of order 1. So we just add a 1 plus epsilon exponent here. And once we know this, well, we are able to show that any minimizer is very slightly above the obstacle, above by a constant that may go to 0 as epsilon goes to 0. And for this function, so everything I spoke about, everything I told was for the function EC. We actually do it on the function EC epsilon. For this function, we are able to show that, well, with this condition, we are able to show the regularity, which means that we can do every symmetrization process to show that it's a ball, and so on. So for this function, we show that the ball is minimal. And then we just have to make epsilon go to 0. And actually, this is not really a problem, because we just need to know that the solution of this energy with epsilon on the ball does not explode as epsilon goes to 0, which is true. Okay. And then about the then about the existence. So the idea is that now we know that any minimizer of EC, or more precisely EC epsilon, is necessarily a ball. So we may take a minimizing sequence to show the existence, a minimizing sequence of domain, and actually a minimizing sequence of functions defined on this domain, since we look at a relaxed problem. And we want to show that this sequence converges to a limit. The problem is that we have a certain constraint on the volume. We want well, we have a constraint that the volume of the domain is equal to m. And so when you take a minimizing sequence, the sequence may start to spread in the space, for example. It may spread uniformly. You may have two connected components that get away from each other, or things like this, where you have several components that are still linked by a thin set, and they start to drift away from each other. Okay, but so we need to show that this cannot happen. And actually, we can show that, excuse me, there are sequences that I call accumulation sequence, such that we know that a certain proportion of the measure stays around this sequence. For example, we can say that in the ball of center pi and of radius 1, there is certain part of there is a fixed part of the volume that stays around this point. So we know that there is at least one with Sobolev injection and so on. And we just need to show that there cannot be more than 2. So here I made a drawing with 3 accumulation sequences, but actually there may be even a countable infinity of accumulation sequences that all go in a slightly different direction. So, okay, now, since we have already studied minimizer, we can show that around a certain point, a certain accumulation sequence, where there is a certain proportion of the volume that stays around this point, we have the convergence to a minimizer of the functional, maybe with a different volume, but of the same functional. So we know that around each sequence accumulation sequence pi, the domain that we translate such that pi is in 0 converge to a ball, which is why I drew them like this, with balls that drift from each other. So it converges to a ball, and what is practical is that balls are bounded. So we may try to take an accumulation sequence and cut around this accumulation sequence without creating a lot of singularities. So here we create just a small singularity, but we can show that this the energy created here is negligible. So we cut around this sequence, and we may move it next to another accumulation sequence. For example, I cut this part here, and I move it here. So when I do this, and we suppose know that they stay close to each other. When we do this, since we didn't increase the energy a lot, this is still a minimizing sequence. But with the way we built our sequence, we know that in this box, the sequence of domain will converge to the disjoint union of two balls, which is impossible, right? Because we know that it converges to a minimizer, which can be only one ball. So this is a proof of the fact that that necessarily there can be only one accumulation sequence, and actually we can show that all of the measure accumulates around this accumulation sequence. So knowing this, we know that there is a minimizer for the function EC. So now, as a conclusion, well, this concludes the proof basically, but we still kinda dodged the issue of showing the regularity on the mixed boundary condition problem by just lifting the function a little bit to use free discontinuity methods to show the regularity. So I think this will be an interesting problem. But for now, I think I will stop here, maybe a bit sooner than expected. So thank you for your attention. If you have any question, do not hesitate.
Thank you very much, Michael, for this presentation. Does anyone have a question? All right, so I'll launch the dance here. You mentioned that as epsilon goes to 0, you don't have a blow up of the minimizers for the minimizers for this EC epsilon as you go to EC, and you just said that this is true. Is there a easy way to see why you wouldn't have blow ups, or it's just
yes, actually. So on the ball, the solution is like a cap like this. So it's radial, it's decreasing.
Mm-hmm.
So you only need the fact that on the boundary, the solution is bounded.
Yeah.
So if it was not, then all the solution would go to infinity, which is not possible just because the energy, the minimal energy on the ball with the modified functional with epsilon, well, it depends on epsilon, but we can bound it by something that does not depend on epsilon.
All right. Do you have another question for Michael? All right. Well, thanks again for this presentation, Michael.